I come from an Indian family. Indians like to have their kids be doctors. I got into MIT for a joint PhD and MBA program, which is a very unique program. Only 4 people in the world were accepted into it, out of many, many applications. At some point, my bank account became less than $100. I was living in like this like very tiny room with like, mice, everywhere. So um, that type of environment is not, maybe a lot of people cannot deal with that. And I think 90% of the people I went to MIT with could not deal with it. I was very focused on like building a great product, but it also helped that restaurant give me free food. And so like, as a very poor, ex-student with making no money and having a very small bank account, that helped a lot. They were like willing to die for the company. That I was like, okay.
Welcome to another episode of Founder Coho, where we dive into the journeys of extraordinary entrepreneurs who have turned their visions into reality. Today, I am thrilled to introduce you to Rajat. He is the founder of Lyft, the second largest riding-share company in America, and also the founder of Presto, a company he built from just an idea all the way to a successful IPO. Rajat's story is one of perseverance, innovation, and a calculated risk-taking. It is a journey that begins far from Silicon Valley's comforts. Born into an Indian family with traditional expectations, Rajat was initially expected to follow the path many Indian parents hope for their children, becoming a doctor. But Rajat's ambitions led him in a different direction. During his early entrepreneurial years, he experienced financial hardship that would have broken many others. What is particularly remarkable about Rajat's journey is how he managed to inspire unwavering loyalty from his early team members. Their dedication became a powerful source of motivation for Rajat himself, creating a virtuous cycle of commitment and perseverance. In today's conversation, we will explore Rajat's fascinating journey with Presto, from identifying product market fit and building a winning team culture to navigating the complex waters of fundraising and ultimately the decision to take the company public. Let us get started. Like in next 15 years, you build a company called Presto. So speaking of Presto, I heard that there's a specific moment when like splitting a problem or splitting a beer with friends that made you come up with Presto ideas. Like what exactly happened at that moment?
Yeah, I was having dinner with a bunch of other MIT and Harvard engineers in Harvard Square in Cambridge, and it came time to split the check between us. And we had this huge problem where we couldn't figure out between a bunch of MIT engineers how to split a check. It just became like this bad joke. How many MIT engineers does it take to split a check? And it turns out that it was very difficult for us, and we ended up getting it wrong. We had to do the whole thing again, after about an hour. And it was just this aha moment where it was like, okay, you realize that like restaurants are so far behind the rest of the world in technology, and physical spaces in general are very hard to adopt technology. And so you need, so Presto is really this idea of digital meets physical, which is still an idea today that's very relevant. Like how do you insert technology into the physical world? And that idea, I think, is a very powerful idea. There are many companies now in that space. Toast is one that's doing really well in the restaurant space. But there's also lots of others, like, there's Flock Safety, which is doing like, computer vision for license plates, um, and helping with catching criminals in neighborhoods, by putting cameras everywhere, right? This is something that China does already, but like, they're doing that here in the US. So there's a lot of these interesting, very physical meets digital companies. Presto itself is still doing now this pivoted to voice AI for drive-throughs. So we made that pivot while I was still there, because the pandemic basically shut down the initial idea, which was like tablets on tables, for restaurants. And in the pandemic, nobody wanted to touch a tablet on their table, right? So, um, but yeah, the basic idea behind Presto is a very powerful one.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear like you had this aha moment, like a problem you face in your life, and you realize that's a problem many people have.
Yeah.
What like many of us would have ideas, and only very few ideas become business. So what thing did you do to turn that into Presto?
The first thing I do was talk to customers. So instead of going to class, I went door to door in restaurants in Boston. So I knocked on the door of restaurants, asked to talk to their owners, and I said, "Hey, I'm from MIT. I have this idea. What do you think?" And a lot of owners said, "Yeah, this is a good idea." And I was pretty unsavvy. I didn't have a good business sense at that time, but I got enough feedback that some people said they would test it if I built it. So I was like, I'll just go build it. And so I got another MIT guy as a co-founder, and we started building it together. And and then we started to learn about the industry. I actually waited tables as a waiter to understand how the industry worked. And the first year and a half of the restaurant of the company, actually, I stayed at that apartment and making under minimum wage, but I was 16 hours a day inside a restaurant,
Mm.
like testing, like building the product inside the restaurant and testing it inside the restaurant with real users and real waiters. So that's how I really learned about the industry, and that's how I learned about how the product works. Um, I was very focused on like building a great product, but it also helped that restaurant give me free food, and so
Oh,
like as a very poor ex-student with making no money and having a very small bank account, that helped a lot.
that's a very genius ideas of being waiter to testing your early product prototype. Um, and that also relates to many startup founder early stages. It's like they have problem to get it to their customers, and so in your cases, you actually become a waiter like for a year for doing that. So what is the everyday life of the waiter when you are a waiter and well at the same time testing product?
So what I would do is I would test the product. Well, I would be coding inside the restaurant. So I'd have my laptop and
Are
I'd
you
have
inside the restaurant?
yeah, I would be writing code inside the restaurant, and then
Mm,
I'll be using these what do you call it? Like this remote desktop basically to
mm,
desktop into the tablet. We got these like Samsung tablets. We put duct tape around, and
mm,
we built like the software for people to order and pay from their seats. We put that on the tables, and then I would like remote desktop into the tablet to see how users were clicking on which buttons
mm,
and
mm,
what they like to do. And then after they finished, I would ask them for their feedback. Like, what do you
mm,
think of this product? And I would talk to the waiters all the time, and I would just be testing the product very like intensively. I think it's the right way to test it. Is like you have to be there to see, and you have to talk to users all the time. So I learned a lot about the product that way. In some cases, I crashed the whole restaurant. Like basically, they have the point of sale system, and I wrote an integration to that, and I made a mistake, and I just crashed the whole restaurant. So like the whole restaurant could not operate because I did something badly. So so that was unfortunate at times, but I fixed those issues, and then eventually got our first funding through those tests,
mm.
and then got into Y Combinator after that, and moved out to the Bay Area in 2010.
So you did a lot of work in testing the product and with the users and talking to them. Is there any particular moment as you are testing that made you realize, wow, I'm building something that is really real and it take off?
Like Lyft, Presto took a long time to take off. It took like 4 or 5 years. We got a pilot with Applebee's. We had a pilot with Uno Chicago Grill in 2010. So we knew that we had there was some chain. Uno Chicago Grill is a small chain, maybe 100
Mm,
restaurants in
mm,
Boston. So it was like someone who was interested in our product, and so they decided to do a trial. And then we
mm,
did another trial with Applebee's starting in, I think, around 2012. And then so Applebee's was interested enough, and then they eventually signed a contract in 2013. So
mm,
that was our first big contract, and then we got several others later, Chili's and Red Lobster and stuff. We had many near-death moments along the whole journey because what we were doing is very unpopular at the time. Like hardware products were not popular. Selling to restaurants was seen as a big problem. So there was a it was a very contrarian play for many years. Eventually, we figured it all out, in like 2017, 2018, 2019. But then by
mm,
the time we figured it out, the pandemic happened in 2020, which killed that whole business, the tablet, on the
mm,
table business.
mm,
Even though, some chains still use that today, the
mm,
big chains still use it. But then we pivoted to AI. We were starting to work on AI stuff in 2018. And in
mm,
2018, we started doing computer vision and voice AI. In fact, we built a tablet that actually had voice AI embedded into it in
mm,
2019. Like, you can go to a restaurant and you can just talk to a tablet as you would talk to a waiter.
mm,
And you can order your food that way. So I still think that could be an interesting play for a lot of people. But ultimately, one thing we realized too is that sit down restaurant market is actually pretty small, especially for the big chains. There are very
Mm.
few restaurants, whereas the fast food market is much bigger, and that makes a huge difference if you're a startup.
So, like you mentioned that the throughout the journey of Presto, you also there's different phases of the company. That if you divide like the Presto's like 15 years, like how would you divide the different period of Presto? What the significant milestones you mark on different period of time?
Yeah, good question. Like I would say the first period was like how like basically like trying to figure out product market fit, right? So like getting a customer to buy the product. We had zero revenue for maybe first 4 or 5 years of the company, maybe
Mm,
up until 2013, we had zero revenue, right?
mm,
So or very close to zero revenue. So until we got our first enterprise customer to buy a product, we were nothing, right?
mm,
Um, and I didn't know how to sell any enterprise customers. I didn't know anything about enterprise sales. Um, it's very different, I would say, for a founder, especially an engineer, to
mm,
know how to sell to an enterprise. It's like a totally different game. It's very relationship driven, very
mm,
political.
mm,
So it's it's not an easy thing.
mm,
Um, and so the first 5 years was complicated. And then even after we won Applebee's, it took 2 or 3 years for us to figure out how to roll out Applebee's and then how to
mm,
win other customers.
mm,
So I would say up until 2016, it was a lot
mm,
of failing,
mm,
basically failing and just
mm,
surviving.
mm, mm,
And I actually think that's true for many founders. Like the first, 5 to 8 years of being
mm,
a founder or being a CEO is very challenging typically.
mm,
And
mm,
you have to just get through that piece of it, and you have to learn a lot, from that process. But then after that, we actually had a lot of success, 2016 onwards, where we were winning other customers, we were handling tough situations better, and we basically won a lot of deals. Like we were winning a lot of enterprise deals, first in tablets and then in AI. And we built a great team. We eventually went public in 2022. So like we were able to raise money in many cases successfully. So ended up being, you know, basically a tale of two halves. The first half very challenging, a lot of
mm,
failure. The second half a lot of success, but dealing with external crises like pandemic and like
mm,
the market crash in 2022 where tech markets just died. We had to deal with those issues, but we knew how to deal with it at that time.
mm. Yeah, yeah, gotcha. Yeah. So like you mentioned that oftentimes like as a startup, being a startup founder, you need a very long time, basically like fighting, surviving mode. For
Mhm,
your case, that all the way until like 2016, 2017, that's probably the time that you were
mhm,
doing that. That's a pretty long period of time.
mhm.
How did you uh make sure you want to like how did you like have the stay motivated throughout the period? How do you keep your team motivated through the period?
Yeah, I was motivated because what we were dealing with was very challenging, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could handle the challenges. So like
Mm,
I was excited by the idea, and I was motivated by the team as well. Like the team I assembled, I think was very strong. A lot of them are still there. Several of them are working with me on my new companies. Like
mm,
the team, because we went through many near-death moments together, we had a very
mm,
strong team bond and we
mm,
had a very motivated people in the team. So they kept me motivated as well because like I
mm,
put the team together and they were so motivated and they were like willing to die for the company that I was like, okay, I'm gonna do
mm,
this as well for them, right? So
mm,
and then also the fact that the challenges we were taking on were very difficult challenges, and this basic idea of like digital meets physical is such a really thorny problem that really no one has solved, right? Like
mm,
even today, like if you look at OpenAI or some of the companies that we all respect, like they can solve a bunch of software problems, but they haven't solved physical meets digital. Like that's like a Tesla level problem or SpaceX level problem. It's a very challenging problem, and it's quite motivating to make a dent in that problem. So
mm,
I think so. The combination of the problem and the team were the most motivating things for me.
mm, mm. Gotcha. Yeah. You mentioned about the team. Actually, one good point you mentioned about is that your team keep you motivated. That's a thing that many founders don't realize that it actually it's like a teamwork, and founders help to set the vision for the team. Team do good work actually will make founders feel fulfilled and also get the motivation from the processes. Um, I'm very curious about how you build your early team. How did you find them?
Yeah. It's absolutely true that the team motivates and inspires founders. Absolutely, and it goes both ways. Like founders inspire their team, and then the team inspires their founders. And how I found early. I mean, I found my CTO who's still there.
Mm,
I found him actually at a career fair where he was recruiting for Microsoft. And I met him at the lunch line for employers. All the employers were getting lunch, and he just in front of me in the lunch line, and I talked to him, and he's like, "I'm Microsoft." At this time, Steve Ballmer was the CEO. I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." You know, Microsoft is a terrible place to be right now. And he was laughing, and then we started the conversation. And I realized he's very smart, and he's managed to get him to leave Microsoft to come join us, and then he became our CTO. Um, you know, we have several other people like that. A lot of people came from MIT initially, um, and we have had other people like referrals. We hired some former waiters as well. People who were like waiters, but they wanted to work on the technology side.
mm,
Several of them are still there at the company, so we changed their careers. We hired someone who didn't have any computer science degree. Um, he was a psychology major, making almost no money. And he did a really good job at one of our tests, and so we hired him as an engineer. And uh, you know, I think he now has a very successful engineering career at Google. So like he's doing it very well. So I took a lot of pride in helping people get to the next step in their careers,
mm,
and also like building a great team of people who are not obvious people, like in their
mm,
like we hired one person who was well over 60, very motivated guy,
mm,
and like but no, nobody else was hiring him because like they thought, oh, this guy's too old for the tech company.
mm,
And I didn't believe that. I really believe that the talent comes everywhere, motivation comes from every place, and I
mm,
really try to have a team of diverse backgrounds and diverse like opinions and
mm,
people who are very motivated and would be willing to challenge me, but also be willing to like get in line and get the job done when it needs to.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Among all the like when you do the hiring, what is the number one characteristic you care the most?
I think the number one thing I care about, how proactive they are. Like, are they
Mm,
willing to jump in, take ownership?
mm,
Obviously, you need to have good skill for whatever people are doing. Like, if you're a designer, you need to be an amazing designer. If you're a developer, you need to be an amazing developer. Um, have great communication and talk about problems. Don't
mm,
be, if you're the type of person to shrink in meetings
mm,
and not bring things up, then I'm probably not going to be a good fit, for you because I want
mm,
people who are vocal, who are like bring up things. I think it's
mm,
very easy to hide in companies. So I think those are the characteristics I typically, of course, honest, good person that
mm,
you can be friends with, and I'm friends with a lot of my former team now, and I think, you hope to build lifelong relationships with these people.
mm. Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, finding the like good team member is very important, and it like you have in the amount of 15 years you bring Presto from all the way from idea to IPO, and there's a lot of new team members joining. Did you face any challenging to as you scaling the company?
Oh yeah, yeah. So hundreds, thousands of challenges. So like yeah, there's of course many challenges, I think just learning how to be a good manager and leader is not is
Mm.
a was a big challenge, and learning how to build a good culture, all these things are quite challenging.
Is there any like culture framework that you used as you build a team and manage a team in Presto?
Yeah, you have to be very intentional about building
Mm,
culture. So I think the key thing is that you have to like really kind of write down all the things you want to see in your culture and understand the trade-offs that you're making, right? Like, so if you want to
yeah.
be, you know, um, do you want to be like the type of culture where people speak up, or do you want to be the type of culture where, people are free to, be passive and not have to speak up?
mm,
Maybe that's not a great example, but there's real trade-offs in everything you do, right? So if
mm,
your culture is going to be like you're going to work, 9 to 9, like
mm,
that's like the company Mercor, they really announced that recently. Well, then you have
mm,
to realize that you're not going to be able to hire certain people who
mm,
can't work that much, right?
mm,
So you
mm,
have to be very explicit about those trade-offs.
mm,
Um, if your culture is going to be that like like Elon Musk has certain cultures, right? Like certain aspects of his culture is also, you know, um, getting stuff done, very quickly, right? Then maybe you're going to make more mistakes. So you have to be explicit of
mm.
that as well.
Yeah. So like in addition to the people side, and very other important part of the company building is getting the resources like fundings. So among your experiences of like the fundings, getting fundings for Presto, what is the most important assets you got?
Um, Look, I think, yeah, funding is not easy, but you get good at it over time. Um, I think one is having a very clear message about
Mm,
how the investor is going to make money on this deal. So like, and the way they're going to make money, you have to really spell it out. So like even like somebody who doesn't know anything about your business
mm,
can figure it out, right? So it's like, okay, here we grew this much last year. We think we're going to grow this much next year. Our market size is this much. If we just get, this percentage of the market, or, this is our path to getting, whatever percentage of the market. And, this money helps us get to this level, and just
mm,
be really, really clear about like how you make money for the investor.
yeah.
Um, then they're more likely to invest. So,
Mm.
I had a lot of success late in the second half. I had a lot of failures in the first half, of raising money.
Yeah, yeah. Many fund like for us, like fundraising is the best way to fundraise. Of course, after you have attraction. So like founders want to give the money, but also like you mentioned in the early stages, usually will be a little bit harder. Um, so you mentioned about like, the 4 and 5 years in which Presto doesn't have the income yet, revenue yet. Did you get any fund raised during that moment, and how did you approach that?
Um, yeah. So how do we approach like fundraising when we had no revenue?
Before you hit
Yeah.
product market fit, you don't have the traction yet.
Yeah, I think the way we approached it is like we're about to get a ton of revenue. So like, we basically like, oh, Applebee's is doing a pilot with us. This is how much the deal is worth, right? We're
Mm,
about to sign this deal. You invest, you can basically benefit from that 0 to 10 million ARR growth, right? And then they would call Applebee's and they would say, are these guys actually going to sign with you? And Applebee's actually at that time, some people would say yes, right?
mm, mm,
So then we got an investment deal done based on that. So, um, and like, so, talking about imminent revenue growth
mm,
coming very soon is kind of important.
gotcha. Yeah, yeah. It's so even like you mentioned about Applebee, like you there was like a few years of deployment. So even during that period, when there was imminent revenue, that can still be a signal that
Yeah.
investors use for the
Yeah.
fundraising.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like raising debt. I mean, like equity, venture capital doesn't want to take that much risk. Like they really want to take as little risk as possible. So
Mm,
either you have like this historical growth, or you have very imminent growth that's easy to diligence, right?
mm,
So
mm,
I'm actually these days not a fan of venture capital. I don't
mm,
think it's the right instrument for a lot of founders.
mm,
I'd rather founders make money from customers and grow more slowly than
mm,
they raise a bunch of VC money and try to like, max out growth. So I think for most founders, they should try to get money from customers because that's a much better signal than raising money from investors. And raising money from investors is also it's just a totally different game from getting money from customers. You have to
mm.
play, this game where you're really hyping up your company. Um, and I think it's not the right game for most founders. And too many founders, especially in Silicon Valley, default to raising too soon, especially. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very good question because there's I feel like in the founder community there's like this status game, as if you raise more money, it become more like important in the community. Um, what would be your advices about for founders to decide whether they should think about fundraising or not think about fundraising?
Well, try to figure out a business model where like you can make money from customers.
Mm,
And if you can make money from customers, that's the best approach, right? Like that money is like, that money is not only non-dilutive, but it's also like it's a good proof that you're building the right product, right?
mm,
So I think the only reason you should raise venture capital is A, if you just started and you have really no money at all. So maybe the first million or 2 million just to get seed capital.
mm,
Um, if you don't have your own capital or you can't get any customers until you build a product, maybe a million or 2 million is okay. And then
mm,
after that, I would say only raise venture capital if like they're begging you to invest, like
mm,
you're growing so fast, and they're like, oh my God, we desperately want to invest in this, and you have full control over the terms. So
mm,
like, I was just talking to a founder yesterday, and
mm,
he'd raised multiple rounds of funding, and he hates his VCs. Like they are the bane of his existence. Like once you let these guys in the door, you can't get them out. So like, you have to realize that your whole company, your whole life is
mm,
at stake when you raise money. So like, especially
mm,
when you raise like a priced round, like a Series A.
mm,
So,
mm.
giving them preferred shares gives them a real lock of your company. And from a founder perspective, it's not worth it in 99% of situations.
Mm.
So only when you're a true rocket ship, that they're begging you to invest. And when they're begging you to invest, you have a lot of control over the terms. So you could basically get rid of all the onerous terms.
Exactly. Yeah. Everything has its own price tag associated with it. Um, and related also getting the funding, like you also eventually bring the Presto the IPO in 2022, right? So walk through us what the journey, how the IPO processes work.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the heydays of 2021, we got an offer to go SPAC, and the offer was a good one. It was a nice valuation. They were bringing a new bunch of new capital to the company. So we thought it was a better option than staying private because private markets were not, that welcoming towards our ideas. This was all before like ChatGPT and LLMs really created this AI boom.
Mm,
And the ironic thing is we were working on this voice AI and all these things that are really sexy now. We were working on it back then, in 2021, 2022, 2022. So if we had probably waited a year, like it would have been even easier for us to go public. But we chose to go public actually in a very difficult time in fall of 2022, which is like one of the worst periods in like tech in history, right? So,
mm,
um, and so we managed to somehow get the deal done. But I think the company also took on too much debt to make that happen, and that ended up hurting the company later. So you know, um, going public ultimately is not that difficult. It's just like a legal process. You
mm,
get some money from some investors, you can go public. Like willing to spend $3 million on legal fees, you can go public. Um, I don't think it's what it's cracked up to be. I don't think entrepreneurs should aspire to it. I don't think that like I think entrepreneurs should do what they do because they want to make an impact. And if they want to look get exit opportunities, I think they can either get dividends from the company, they can do sell secondary if they really
mm,
want to, um, or they can sell the company all right. Going
mm,
public is very challenging, I think, for many entrepreneurs. I mean, even entrepreneurs that have very good outcomes when they go public, which we didn't really have, but like even founders that do, they can't really sell their shares because every time they sell their shares, it's like a
mm,
big negative mark against their company. So like
mm.
you're locked in. It's not like this freedom where you have all this liquidity.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned a good point. Oftentimes, the founders are always locked in. So the IPO is actually the liquidation more helps from the people around you, like the
Yeah,
investors or the
and
early
employees.
employees. Yeah, to liquidate.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thank you very much for sharing your insight as building the team in Presto and the fundraising journey and IPO journey in Presto. I would like also to talk about more about your recent chapter of your life since you left Presto. So after leaving the Presto, you are very active in startup landscape and built two startups since then.
Mhm.
Uh, Tell us more about your new startups.
Yeah, happy to chat. So I'm working on two things right now, three things actually. So Lima Tribe and a podcast called Founders in Arms. So Lima is a concierge for immigrants to help them navigate their journey to the United States. Nowadays, we're needed more than ever because people are trying to, get off the F visa, get on, O visa or green card, get their EB1 or EB2. So we've helped many people get approved for these things, and it's not easy to get. So, and we're much better than immigration lawyers working with them directly because we put the whole package together. Like it's not just filing the paperwork; it's actually very strategic. It helps people build their profiles, get all the different things they need to qualify for these visas as well. Um, so that's Lima, and if anyone's interested in that, they can email me at raj@limadream.com. The other thing we do is, or I do, is Tribe. Tribe is a next gen group chat app. It's at tribechat.com. We're trying to build close communities, close human relationships. In a world of AI, we think like humans will want to connect with each other even more, and maybe be enabled by AI. So we have this group chat app where people can connect with each other and also leverage AI, but also a bunch of other features that we have there to make a joyful chat. Um, and the third thing is the podcast, Founders in Arms podcast, which I do with the CEO of Mercury, Imad, and we interview new founders every week, and I think we have some good, discussions.
But you dive back to the founding a startup. So what drove you to dive back to founding?
I really like building companies. Same thing. Why what happened at MIT, right? Is still I'm still the same guy. I think a lot of people get burned out. You're absolutely right that they have, they really feel burned out, and I think a lot of the reason for the burnout is, um, I think the stress of operating a venture-backed company. I think when both my companies today are not venture-backed, and I think it's much more fun to build a company that's not venture-backed. It's really you focus more on the joy of serving, a customer, and the
Mm.
joy of building a good product, and joy of taking care of your team. Like I think I would recommend this journey for any founder who feels burnt out by their journey. Is like try to do it, without the venture capital, and try to make money from customers instead of trying to make money from investors. Talking to investors, I find, is like the least favorite part of almost all founders. So if you take that piece out of it, you actually are left with the part that you like the most. Um, I think some founders don't like talking to customers, and I don't have any good news for them. Like it's if you don't want, you have to be good at talking to customers and or like really enjoy talking to customers. And if you don't like that, you have to find one that you like, find a
Mm.
customer base that you like. In my case, really like helping immigrants, really like helping people who use group chats. And so like and the founders in our podcast were serving founders, which is my tribe, right? Literally. So
Mm.
I think it's very fun. I would say from a work perspective, I've never had more fun. I'm working very hard, but I've never had more fun. So and I think the more you do it as a founder, the better you get. So you don't have all that uncertainty that you have early in your journey. Like how many years are you in your journey, Conan?
Uh, I I started in 2022, so it's 3 years now.
3 years, yeah. So
Yeah.
the first few years can feel very confusing. It can feel like a steep learning curve,
Mm.
and not that comfortable, right? But
Mm.
as you get later on, you start embracing those challenges and you start to know how to react in different situations. And it becomes, I think, very fun. So it becomes more fun later on.
And in addition to that, is there any other book or uh, any website or resources you would recommend our audience to check it out?
I really like the book Shoe Dog. That's one of the most inspirational books I've read. I like the book. It's not a founding book, but it's a great life book. It's When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi.
Uh,
It's a great book as well, just about like life and death. I found it really interesting and inspirational. Um, what else? I think those are the two for now that people should definitely check out.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. Cool, cool. What are the best way for people to reach out to you?
You can find me on Tribe, my app.
We'll
Uh,
also
you,
put the Bible link in
yeah,
the
you can put a link. Yeah, put a link in there to, especially to, you can join the Founders in Arms podcast Tribe and message me on there.
awesome. Cool, cool. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your entrepreneurial journey with us today. And your insights has been so helpful to me personally as well. Has always been super helpful. I think to your audience will also be incredibly helpful. Really appreciate your time. I love to keep in touch and also compare notes once in a while. It's fun. Thanks for joining us for this inspiring conversation. Loved what you heard? Subscribe now to join our community of founders and innovators. Drop a comment about your favorite takeaway and stay connected for more insights from Silicon Valley's most exciting change makers. Until next time, keep building, keep connecting.